Hi, I'm Agnes and welcome to my eclectic channel. I make videos for fun, a number of them in the kitchen, and today I'm going to try and make bread. I do make bread on a semi-regular basis, so this is a tried and true method, but baking is never the same from one time to the next, and especially when you're working with yeast. So we shall see how this turns out. The recipe I'm using calls for 300 deciliters of milk, which is about a cup and a quarter. It is a Swiss recipe, so it's using weights and the metric system. And yeah, milk. This is a milk-based bread, pain au lait. Just tastes good, is soft. It's a good recipe, but it does use milk. You could also make it with water and you'd get a slightly different bread, I think. And then butter, a quarter cup, and this will go in a saucepan. We want some yeast, 1.5 teaspoons. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that. No, keep that in mind because let's finish the ingredients. And then 500 grams of flour, which I've pre-measured, and a bit of salt. That's it. So first we want to check that the yeast is working by mixing it with some liquid and heating it up and see whether we get bubbles. And if we get bubbles, then we're ready to go. So I'm going to use a bit of the milk, and here it's not precise science, maybe about a cup. Not even, I mean, you just want a bit of liquid. And then put the 1.5 teaspoons of the dry yeast in there. And you want to heat this up, not too hot, it should just be warm to the touch. I happen to have a yogurt maker that has the ideal temperature. It works really well when I use that, so I'll pop this into my yogurt maker and let it sit for, well, I don't know yet. I'll let it sit until I get bubbles and we'll come back. I've seen a number of debates on the internet about yeast, and two things you read is that one, you need to put sugar in your mix in order to get it to proof. You notice I did not do that. And the other one is whether you kill your yeast if you keep it in the freezer. I keep mine in the freezer, and it works. And bakers, I've read bakers' blogs where they say, yeah, you keep it in your freezer and it keeps essentially forever. And then in terms of sugar, that used to be true with the older, like when we did not preserve, well, we didn't have methods to preserve the yeast as fresh as we do now. So if you're working with like almost dead yeast, you need to feed it, and that's where the sugar came in. But if you're using fresh yeast, there's really no need for sugar. And actually, one of the reasons I like to make my own bread is because I don't want my bread to be sweet. I live in the US, and it seems to be like the normal way of making bread and consuming bread. But having grown up in France, I can tell you that it is not normal for regular bread to be sweet. Like it doesn't have sugar in it. Only dessert breads, like if you're making brioche or any other kinds of dessert bread, then you'll put sugar, and you'll put enough sugar that indeed it'll be intentional. Well, the yeast is going. We want to melt the butter. And add the milk. So that's kind of a delicate operation because the butter can turn brown easily. It melts quite fast. And then there's a trick when you're trying to mix the milk. The butter is nearly melted. I've been on medium high heat and I'm just making sure it constantly moves, and I'm really monitoring it. So here go the last little bits. It's trying to boil. Very soon it's going to turn orange, which is not what we want. So now we're ready to mix the milk. If I pour all the milk at once, it's going to be a problem because the butter will clump and we don't want that. So the key is to pour a trickle, mix that. You don't need the heat at that point anymore. And mix that, and then maybe another trickle, still boiling. And success! It's mixed, so now I can just put the rest of it. So now we have all the pieces and we want to put everything together in the dough. At this point it's a good idea to put the salt. My recipe calls for a teaspoon of salt. I don't think they really mean it. So I'm going to put just maybe a quarter teaspoon of salt. Then we want to mix that well. Now we mix it all in. The mix with the yeast and the milk. A little bit of yeast left here. And then the butter and the rest of the milk. And we want to form the dough. Now we want to punish this a little bit, knead it. In order to have soft bread, it turns out that you can't skip the kneading. So there's one kneading that happens right when you mix the ingredients. And I have unfortunately completely ran out of flour. I should have saved a little bit. So hopefully this doesn't stick too much. So far so good. But yeah, you want to play maybe one or two of your favorite songs and do this. Next, we want to let this proof for an hour and a half until it roughly doubles in size. Places that are good for proofing, it obviously needs to be warm. So if I make bread in the summertime, as it is today, I think my attic will be warm enough. It's not terribly warm today, but I think hopefully the attic will be hot enough. And if I'm doing this in the winter time, then it's harder to find a warm place. So what I'll do is I will turn on my oven on the lowest temperature setting, then I turn it off and I put the dough in, and every hour I have to reheat the oven. But my lowest temperature setting is 170 degrees, which is too hot. So you got to turn it off first and then put the dough in, and pretty soon the oven will cool down to a good temperature for the dough. And just it takes longer. If it's colder, it takes longer. Alright, so without further ado, this goes in my attic. It's been an hour and a half in my attic, and it's like this. I don't think it's quite there. I think it would take another hour at the temperature that it is up there. It's not very sunny today, so it's actually quite comfortable, which means it's not quite warm enough for real proofing, but at least it's working, so my yeast is doing its job. So I think I'm going to pop it in the oven for 30 minutes just to get it a little bigger, and then it'll be ready. The best bread dough proofing weather I've had was a month and a half ago. I was down in North Carolina in July. Utter misery outside, I can't tell you. Really hot, humid, but by golly, beautiful bread. I finished this in the oven and that's perfect. So now it's summer kneading, again 1 or 2 songs worth, and then we'll divide the dough. I really wish I had flour. I expect this might stick, but we'll see. And yeah, I do like to taste my raw dough. Alright, it's feels so sticky, warm to the touch, smooth. Yeah, good kneading is really the key to soft bread. So I'm going to separate this into, I'll have to judge, I'm going to form little, I'm making buns. I'm going to form just little balls. I'm not doing anything fancy. Knowing that this will rise again quite a bit as it bakes. Oh, and I need to start my oven, 390 degrees Fahrenheit. 500 grams of flour made 16 buns, and these will go in the oven as soon as it's ready. We'll start with 15 minutes and see what that gives us. The buns, or rolls I should call them, have been in the oven for 10 minutes. And it's a good time to check. We don't want them to be overdone. It looks like they do need that last 5 minutes. It's been 15 minutes and they look perfect. So I'll take them out. I like my bread pale. Not too done. Typically when you, French bread in France is often sold quite done. And in the boulangerie you get your pick, and a lot of people pick the black baguette. It's a local taste, but it's really dry. So I like my bread just done. Like those are just starting to be a little golden. And that's exactly how I like them. Let's have a taste. This is one of the ones that got a little more done. So the bottom is a little brown. There's only a couple of those. I think this one was smaller. It also depends upon where they are in the oven. I have a gas oven. And so I like to eat those first, fresh out of the oven, because they're delicious. This one will be a little crunchy on the outside and gooey inside. It's still really hot. There we go. Oh, smells really good. Yeah, but if I don't eat it fresh out of the oven, then this is one of the rolls that will be drier and harder if I eat it later. You can always retoast and use some butter on it or something. I like to eat my bread as is, even when I have it with a meal. I don't put butter on it. Typically, the French don't do that. Mm. Mm. Very soft, just right. Yeah, when you go to fancy dinners in the United States, they will serve you the little plate with a butter knife and the bread. And it's expected, and everybody does it. They butter up their bread, because that's how the French do it, right? No, the French don't. You just get the bread and you eat that with dinner. So homemade bread is really not hard. It's just a few ingredients. The proofing of the yeast really is not that difficult. I didn't show mine, but sometimes it will foam a lot, and sometimes it won't. Like this time it didn't, but you can smell whether your yeast is activated. Yeah, you can just smell it. If it smells really yeasty, it means it's going and it's all good. And you saw the bread just proofed. And then the kneading. You do get a 20-minute total workout when you make bread. But aside from that, pretty easy and really worth it. I love the days when I bake fresh bread. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. Bread like this, that's neither too salty nor sweet, is goes with everything. So I'll have this with my dinner, or also for breakfast or for an afternoon snack with some sweet spread on top. It works either way.